Close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 7 p.m. on Thursday, the 27th of June, and this is a GB News election special with me, Camilla Tominey. Welcome to Vote 2024, The Leaders. So good evening and welcome to this special edition of Vote 2024, The Leaders. Tonight we bring you a sit-down interview with the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. It's exactly 1 week until the election. Can Rishi keep hold of the keys to number 10? Last week we interviewed Sir Keir Starmer and yesterday Sir Ed Davey as part of our Vote 2024, The Leaders series. Today we bring you the Prime Minister.
We're having an election based on trust and what you'll do in the future. Yeah. You haven't cut migration.
Well, I've been Prime Minister for 18 months, Chris. And let's
your party, forgive me, your party.
Okay.
He was slightly tetchy when pushed on the Tories' record on immigration.
You lose your seat next week.
No, of course. I'm fighting very hard everywhere.
And as you saw there, he's not quite sure he can retain his seat.
What did you think about that remark about you personally?
Yeah, look, he should answer what he means by that.
And there he was asking Nigel Farage to explain himself. Well, with me to discuss this, we have voices from each of the three major political parties. We've got a cracking show lined up tonight, but first, here's the news.
Thank you, Camilla. I'm Polly Middlehurst with the latest GB News and the top story. One person in England has died in the ongoing E. coli outbreak, which is linked to salad. That's according to the UK Health Security Agency. It comes after a recent outbreak which saw 86 people admitted to hospital, according to figures released from last week. A number of food manufacturers have had to recall their pre-made sandwiches, wraps and salads sold in all major supermarkets and retail chains over fears they're linked to possible contamination, and they've narrowed it down to lettuce being linked to these infections. Sir Keir Starmer says a Labour government would work with whoever is in power in France on tackling illegal migrant journeys across the English Channel from France. Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak returned to the campaign trail today after clashing last night at Nottingham Trent University, where they were in debate over illegal immigration and the betting row in a TV special. The Prime Minister says the country would be in danger, though, under a Labour government being led by a leader who he said has no plan to stop the boats.
Keir Starmer changes his mind on almost every major position that he has taken. Right? And times that we're living in, you need leadership which has the courage of its convictions. That's what I have. You have to ask yourself, why is he not telling you his plan for the country, what he wants to do? Because he probably doesn't think you're going to like it when you hear it. Right? We know, as you saw last night, those of you that were watching the debate, absolutely no answers about how to tackle immigration. Right? I've got a plan. We're bringing immigration down. We've got a plan to stop the boats. He would make us the soft touch of Europe when it comes to that issue.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer dismissed that, telling us at GB News that the issue of illegal migration, he said, is much more than just borders.
Record numbers of people are coming here in small boats. He's lost control of our borders, literally lost control, not only of the numbers that are coming, but also who's coming. And so this is not just a border issue, it's a national security issue. The deterrent is smashing the gangs that are running this vile trade so that nobody gets into a boat to cross the channel. The Prime Minister is simply interested in a gimmick, the Rwanda scheme, for people who've already arrived here, a few hundred people.
It's Keir Starmer. Now, the former Newcastle United owner, Sir John Hall, has switched his support to Reform UK after previously donating tens of thousands of pounds to the Conservative Party. He was cheered on at a Reform speech near Sunderland today, where the party leader Nigel Farage was speaking in front of an audience. Mr Farage saying it was a privilege to welcome Sir John into the Reform family and saying he'd made a substantial donation to the party's campaign. He said he feels the Tories have let him down.
The Conservative Party has let me down. They've been a failure for many years, for the last 14 years. And they don't speak now for my English is my way of life, which I feel is under threat. And I looked around, basically, who I find to speak for me. And the Reform Party, I feel, and Nigel's the only ones who are going to speak about saving my English culture.
Sir John Hall, who switched his political report to Reform UK. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Polly Middlehurst, and I'm back in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks, Polly. Well, welcome to the third interview in our Vote 2024 The Leaders interview series. Earlier today, our GB News political editor, Christopher Hope, spoke to the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak.
Prime Minister, thank you for joining GB News in a pub in Nottingham today. Great to see you. Thank you.
Chris, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Week 6 of a 6-week campaign. You were definitely up for the fight in that debate last night. Where has that Rishi Sunak been for the past 5 weeks? Always been there?
It's always been there. And you know what? When you're fighting for what you believe in, it's easy. And that's what I'm doing in this campaign. I think the choice facing the country is incredibly important. Now, I get that people have some frustrations with me, with our party, but this isn't a by-election. Right? This is a choice about the future of our country. It's going to have enormous consequences for everyone, their family, their finances. I don't want to see people subject to Labour's tax rises, so I'm fighting very hard to say, give me the opportunity to keep cutting your taxes, building on the progress we made. That's a choice I want people to focus on. Yeah. That's what you saw last night at the debate.
And it worked, apparently, according to the polls, to say it did bring back some people who are against you to be more in favour of voting Tory. So
I think what people saw last night is Keir Starmer just does not have a plan for government. On the economy, no answers. On immigration, absolutely no answers.
Well, 9
on
times
welfare,
you asked him on this
he can't tell you what he's going to do. I've got a very clear plan for what I'm going to do with illegal migrants. They don't get to stay in our country. They should be removed. He can't tell you what he's going to do. On welfare, the guy thinks that you can't make a penny of savings from the welfare budget. That's just clearly not right. That's why I want to build on the progress we've made, cut people's taxes, and last night people could see the choice very clearly.
We'll come to those areas in a minute. You used the word surrender 17 times. Is that a loaded word? Is that to appeal to Reform UK voters? Why the word surrender?
I don't want people to surrender to Labour. I don't want them to surrender to their tax rises. I don't want people to surrender our borders to Labour, our welfare system to Labour, our national security to Labour. Right? I'm up for the fight. I want people to join me in that fight. Like, we should not surrender our country to this. Right? We can do better. We can continue.
So is Labour the enemy then? You're surrendering to an enemy, is that right? What do you mean by the word surrender?
I get that people have frustrations. I get that. Last year's has not been easy. I'm not saying we've got everything right. I completely understand that. But this is really important, this election. If Labour are in power, they'll have a blank cheque to do whatever they want. That means put up your taxes. Reverse all the changes I made to get us to net zero in a sensible way. Right? Reverse all the progress we made on illegal migration. Release everyone out on our streets, not on planes. Like, this is the choice facing people. It's really important. I don't want people to sleepwalk into the 4th of July. They should not sleepwalk into this. People have got to wake up to the danger that a Labour government means for our country. I don't want that to happen. That's why I'm fighting so hard.
So Keir Starmer seemed a bit unprepared for the attacks, the way you were going after him a bit, getting in his face. Why was that? What do you think that was? I mean,
it's a question for him, right? But I'm clear about what I want to do, and this is what I keep saying about him. This is a guy who can't tell you what he wants to do if he's Prime Minister. He wants to have the most important job in our country. He can't even tell you what he would do with it. And on any position that he has taken in the last few years, he changes his mind 5 seconds later. That's not leadership. And I could tell you, in the uncertain times that we live in, the things you have to grapple with as Prime Minister, if you don't have the courage of your convictions, right, if you constantly change your mind, if you're not straight with people about what you want to do, you cannot lead. Right? And that is the difference between him and me. I'm clear. I get that not everyone is going to agree with me about absolutely everything, but at least you know where I stand. That's what leadership is about, and he just does not display that, and that's what you saw last night.
We're stung by Robert Blackstock, that's a member of the public who asked a question saying you are a pretty mediocre Prime Minister.
Well, I think also, apparently, he gave some comments afterwards to the media saying you couldn't trust a word that Keir Starmer says and that he was going to vote Conservative, I think. But look,
I think he's not decided yet when he saw the GB News last night.
The choice for people is vote Conservative, have your taxes cut, have migration dealt with, get to net zero in a sensible way, and crucially, have your pension protected, or the opposite of all of that with the Labour Party, right? If you vote for anyone else, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get higher taxes, our borders aren't going to be secure, we're not going to invest more in our national defence, and for the first time in our country's history, pensioners are going to pay tax on their retirement income, on their pension, right? That is a clear choice for people. If you're a pensioner watching this show, you need to understand that if Keir Starmer's your Prime Minister, the state pension is going to be subject to income tax for the first time in our country's history. A retirement tax is coming, capital R, capital T. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair. That's why we're going to institute the Triple Lock Plus, right? That's my desire to help pensioners. Keir Starmer last night couldn't say he'd do the same thing. And again, the choice is clear for everyone.
Wasn't he going to the heart of a problem with you personally, though, that you seem to be good at spreadsheets and good at kind of calculations, but less good at the politics, the raw politics?
Yeah, well, this is about the type of country you want to build, right? Tax cuts are not about spreadsheets. Tax cuts are about the fact that I believe people work really hard and they should get to keep more of their own hard-earned money. That's the type of country I believe in. That's the values that I believe in. I believe in a country that's aspirational, right? If you work hard and you save so that you can have a better retirement, if you want to buy your own home, I think those are all good things. If you want to set up a business and become self-employed, I think those are all things that the government should be supporting by cutting your taxes on those things so you can keep more of your own money. That's why we want to abolish national insurance for the self-employed. That's why we want to abolish stamp duty effectively for first-time buyers, young couples getting on the housing ladder. It's why we want to support families by expanding child benefit. Like, these are all tax cuts that speak to my values, and my values are about supporting people's hard work, supporting their aspiration.
But Britain's largely shrugging at what you're saying. If you look at the polls, the poll last night from the MRP, from Electoral Calculus, found that you might have as few as 60 MPs next week. I know you'll say the only poll that matters is next Thursday. Don't say it, please don't say it. But, you know, you've gifted Labour a supermajority by going early on the election campaign.
Yeah, the only poll that does matter is on the 4th of July, right? But what I'd say is, look, if those polls that you're talking about, right, end up happening on polling day, that means handing Labour a blank cheque. Blank cheque. You can't get it back, but I'd say to everyone watching that those polls aren't destiny. Right? People watching can make the difference.
And you can turn around a 20 point lead for the Labour.
There's other research that just shows it's something like 150,000 voters in key places will make the difference. Those are people that'll be watching, right? If you're watching this show right now, you can make the difference. I get people's frustrations with me, with the party. We haven't got everything right. I know that. We haven't made as much progress as we would have liked. But this is an important election about your future. You do not want Labour in charge with that blank cheque to do what they want for your family finances. Go out there, vote Conservative, so we can stop that from happening.
Have you regretted for a single moment going early? You could have waited until November. We all thought you were waiting until November. Net migration will come down in September. You may have 2 interest rate cuts. Might see a growing economy, other factors. The NATO summit, you'll look great in Washington, 2.5% GDP. Blenheim summit at the EU. All these things you've given away.
No, we have all those things. The economy growing faster than all our major competitors.
Why not bank them and then go to the...
Inflation back to target, right? Wages rising faster than prices, right? Mortgage rates starting to come down, right? We have the foundations, and we're already starting to cut people's taxes.
Gamble house.
So this is the moment for our country to choose its future. And the future that I want people to have is one where their taxes continue to be cut. I don't want them subject to Labour's thousands of pounds worth of tax rises that are coming everyone's way. Mark my words. Your pension, your home, your council tax, your car, you name it, Labour are going to tax it. It's in their DNA. Keir Starmer is not being straight with people about that. Their taxes are going to go up if he's in power. You talk about the NATO summit. Again, clear contrast here, right? If I'm everyone's Prime Minister, I go to that NATO summit, increasing our defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, because this is the most dangerous time our country has faced in decades. We need to keep people safe. We need to get our allies to invest more. Keir Starmer's your Prime Minister. He goes to that NATO summit. What's the first thing he's done? Cut defence spending.
Well,
he's not matching.
He wants to get there. He won't say when or how.
He's not matching our pledge. That means defence spending is going to go down from the plans that we've got in place, which are already happening with more money going into the armed forces. It's going to be in the back of the room. Right, what does that do? What message does that send to our adversaries, to China, to North Korea, to Russia, Iran? Here's a new Prime Minister who says, no, I don't think it's important to invest more in our country's defence. I am deeply worried about what that means. People should be deeply concerned.
But Lord Cameron was recorded maybe by Russians or somebody saying that Labour will be as keen on backing Ukraine as the Tories have been.
Well, as we've seen, one person then, and Labour have supported what we're doing on Ukraine, where we have led, but they won't be able to continue doing it at the levels that I have said that we will, because they're not investing more in our defence.
How's the polling in your own seat? Will you lose your seat next week?
No, of course. I'm fighting very hard everywhere.
MRP say you'll
again. It's a great privilege to be Member of Parliament, or have been the Member of Parliament for Richmond, and now Richmond and Northallerton, as the seat is called in North Yorkshire. I very much hope I have the opportunity to continue doing that. Right, and as I was out campaigning just the other day, and I'll be back there as well, and my family are all out there campaigning.
Charters out there. Okay.
They are, as they always are. My parents are there, as they are there every election. Okay. So they're all at it.
Chris Hope thoroughly enjoying himself there, interviewing the Prime Minister in a pub, it seems. Well, let's get into the detail of all that with my superstar cross-party panel. I've got former Liberal Democrat Mark Oaten, I've got the Labour peer Maurice Glassman, and I've got the Conservative peer and journalist Paul Goodman. Lovely to see you this evening, gents. Let's start with you, Paul. I mean, has he been freebasing Weetabix? Fighting talk from the Prime Minister. Many watching that, and indeed watching the debate last night, might be asking themselves why on earth he didn't start the campaign in this fine fettle, because he's speaking more aggressively, he's unrelentingly attacking Labour. He sounds like he's full of vim and vigour. The only trouble is 6 million people have already voted, Paul, by post.
TV interviews of this kind, actually rather like our discussion, have an element of artificiality, which is that if you talk to any of the Tories in private, and indeed Tory ministers are going into the newspapers and the media saying, we're going to lose, but he can't say that in a TV interview. So actually, he was there trying to make his case, whereas actually the real case the Tories are trying to make at the moment is Labour are going to win by a landslide. Don't give them a landslide because you don't really want to. But it wasn't a case that he could really make. He had to set out his stall and do his best.
Although he did attack Keir Starmer repeatedly, Maurice, so let's just remind ourselves of some of those attack lines, that if you vote for Labour, he's just going to write a blank cheque. Don't surrender. You're going to sleepwalk into a Labour supermajority when taxes are in Labour's DNA. Your pension, your house, your car, they're all going to be taxed. Oh, and by the way, your pension. Maurice.
Oh, it's pathetic. I mean, it really is pathetic. It's reheated.
Oh, are you ruling out tax cuts for Labour then?
No, I'm just saying this is all, his whole stuff is reheated Thatcherism. He doesn't, he's a politician incapable of adjusting to the new age.
He raises a point, doesn't he? Because we know what Labour won't tax. They won't tax working people, whatever that means. But in order to pay for their spending
I've got an
pledges,
idea what that means.
Well, does it mean millionaires? Because presumably they work.
Well, some do, and some are rentiers who just make a lot of money out of property and not doing anything.
But you do understand that people are wondering what Labour are going to do to afford their spending pledges. They'll have to tax something.
One of the gifts of Rishi Sunak is that he's left a space where Labour really doesn't have to say too much at all because of the incredibly hopeless nature.
You're shaking your head at that, Mark.
Of this government.
I despair.
I despair,
Maurice, because if the best that you can do is to not inspire by just saying nothing, that is really pathetic, frankly.
No, there's one thing
I want to see inspiration. I'll give Tony Blair something. Back in '97, there was hope, there was energy, it was a fresh beginning. Starmer is so dull and so cautious that it's not inspiring. You're going to win, but there's no great enthusiasm out there for it.
We're not just going to win. We're going to win very well
because the Tories are so bad, but not because of enthusiasm for Starmer, and that's a shame.
There's something that Rishi Sunak said that is really wrong, which is I'm involved in this. Labour is absolutely committed to defence and the defence of Ukraine.
Will he equal that 2.5% of GDP pledge then?
I can say yes. I mean, that's already being talked about.
OK, so how's that going to be paid for?
Well, in the same way that the Tories are going to pay for it. That's their
But you've accused them of putting taxes up, or at least they would if they win government again. So at some point, and the Institute for Fiscal Studies has pointed this out, Maurice, and this applies to all of the parties, these manifestos are flimsy because they're not fully costed, because, as I say, we know what Labour won't tax, but we don't know what they will. So are you able to rule out taxes on your pension, your home and your car?
I don't think any serious politician can rule that out because of events. This is not the... I mean, that's part of the problem. What I would say is Labour is astonishingly fiscally conservative. That's one of the things that means that they can't be inspiring.
Let's bring Paul in on that statement. Paul.
I think it's a strange old election because, on the one hand, the Institute of Fiscal Studies, obviously, it's got a point. There are these huge election issues, demographic change, ageing population, mass migration. But if the parties deal with them in a straightforward way, which would mean being far more open about spending cuts and tax rises, we, the commentariat, journalists like you, would be all over them. And that's been the paradox or the central situation of this election. It's being fought out on a very narrow ground, and voters know intuitively there are tax rises coming and spending cuts coming, whoever wins.
Mark, you made that point about, which kind of echoed what Nigel Farage said about Starmer, that he was Blair without the flair. Do you agree with that, Maurice? I mean, he's not quite got the Blair effect. It's not like there are people in the streets going, I can't wait for a Starmer government. No, is it government by default?
And that's what... But I mean, I agree with Paul that it's extraordinary the extent to which the Conservatives have lost their political direction, and part of it is also, you know, taxes and this is, you know, how are we going to build an industrial strategy, I think? How are we going to start making things again? And I think that's related to the defence spending. Mark?
Point, Mark, and then we'll have to...
There is huge dissatisfaction with politics, and that's one of the reasons reform will do so well. And part of the blame lies at the Labour Party for not infusing people.
Why aren't the Lib Dems?
Well, I think we're doing rather well. I think we're going to do very well indeed. I wish we'd be more honest about taxation, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm saying is you're not the beneficiary of the reform insurgency, though.
Thank goodness, because we wouldn't want those votes, frankly.
Yes, you're a great party.
Not from some of the reform people I've seen.
Hold that thought. I have to read out the candidates for Richmond and Northallerton because the Prime Minister mentioned that he was standing as a candidate there. Rishi Sunak is there for the Conservatives, would you believe? Jason Barnett is there as the Independent. Count Binface, he's there for the Count Binface Party. Daniel Callaghan is there for the Liberal Democrats. Angie Campion is there as an Independent. Louise Dickens is there for the Workers' Party of Britain. Kevin Foster's there for the Greens. Rio Goldhammer is there for the Yorkshire Party. Nico Omelana is there as an Independent. Brian Richmond is another Independent. Sir Archibald Stanton is there for the Monster Raving Ludo Party. And Lee Taylor's there for Reform. And let's not forget Tom Wilson, who's standing for Labour. Well, thank you very much to my panel. I'll speak to you all again shortly because I know you've got lots to say. Up next, it's going to be the second part of our one-to-one interview with the Prime Minister. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
I've got a grade 3 astrocytoma brain tumour. Once I was diagnosed, I tried to do my claim with my insurance company and was rejected. They then also cancelled my life insurance and also cancelled my wife's policies as well.
And this is Zurich Insurance, John.
This is Zurich,
and their point was, because you'd had some dizzy spells, which you hadn't told them about, they say dizzy spells equates to a brain tumour, which there's no evidence to support that.
I was with King's College Hospital. They ignored them. King's College Hospital were the experts.
And you were expecting £25,000?
Yeah, that was a critical illness claim.
Critical illness, because you've got a critical illness. Clearly, it couldn't be more critical, could it?
No.
Michelle, you've got a lovely poorly husband, and you're also worrying about paying the bills and what the future holds.
Yeah.
What impact is this having on you on a day-to-day basis?
I try not to think too much about the future because it does upset me. I'm kind of thinking, when John does go, I'm left with a mortgage to pay and 2 young children.
How old are your kids?
5 and 3.
Right.
So it's incredibly tough.
And are you working?
I haven't worked since having the children.
Right.
That's a decision we made when we had children.
In the grand scheme of things, this amount of money is a drop in the ocean for a company like Zurich.
Yeah, because I think they could make all this go away.
I've read some of the statement. Zurich's statement. We're sorry to hear of the very difficult circumstances Mr. Rendler's family are experiencing. You're terminally ill, and they're calling that difficult circumstances.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Vote 2024, The Leaders, with me, Camilla Tominey. Just before the break, we heard the first part of our interview with the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Let's now take a listen to part 2.
Betting row was cut through. I've got to ask you about it. How did it feel to you when your friend Craig Williams admitted putting a bet on?
No, I was incredibly angry. I was incredibly angry.
He's a friend of yours, right? An ally of yours.
When I learned about all of this, I was furious. Like everyone would be furious. The idea that people would do something like that is just the antithesis of what public service is all about, right? That's why I was so angry, and that's why we initiated our own internal inquiries alongside the Independent Gambling Commission investigation that is happening, and that's why I've taken action. And when we reached a point where we had the information, we acted, and I've suspended the 2 parliamentary candidates, and I've also been crystal clear. And if someone has broken the rules, not only should they face the full force of the law and the consequences of that, I will make sure that they are booted out of the Conservative Party.
And there's no further candidates affected? There's rumours of 15, as many as 15?
Yeah, look, as far as you know. I'm not aware of that, and as I said, when we are made aware of things, we will initiate our own internal inquiries. I don't obviously have details of the Gambling Commission's inquiries. They don't report to me. They're rightly and necessary.
But you're doing an internal inquiry in the party.
That's the right and proper thing to do, right?
So your internal investigations have found no other cases so far?
As I said, I'm not aware of any. When we are made aware, we will conduct, as we have done, and I've acted, right? I've dealt with it. We've got the information, we've suspended the candidates, and I'm crystal clear. That's my approach to these things, to do things properly and rigorously. But where there's reason to believe that something is inappropriate, I will take action, as I've done. We've suspended these candidates, and everyone who's broken the law should face the full consequences.
Does the row neatly summarise for some people, maybe in Labour says so, that you've forgotten the privilege of being in office, that people take it for granted? They're taking punts on information they hear internally, allegedly.
Yeah, well, look, let me tell you why I'm in this, right? My grandparents were very fortunate to be able to come to this country with not very much. 2 generations later, I'm sitting here with you, as I have done many times, with the enormous privilege of being this country's Prime Minister and also, before the election, Member of Parliament in North Yorkshire. And it's hard to express, for me, just what a debt of gratitude I owe to our country and how I feel about it. And that's why I love our country so deeply, what it's done for my family. I don't think my story would be possible in any other country. And that's why I'm in this, because of what this country's done for me. And I feel an enormous sense of gratitude and duty to do everything I can in this job to make as many people's lives better as I can. And that is why I'm fighting so hard in this election. And yes, as you said, look, it's tough and all the rest of it, but I believe that this election is so important for people's futures. I don't want them to allow their frustrations with some of the things in the past, let them sleepwalk, and let them sleepwalk into something that is going to be so damaging for their family's financial security.
Is it time to ban?
And that is the choice.
Yeah. Is it time to ban politicians from betting on politics, like footballers can't bet on football?
When people are cheating at gambling, it is illegal. We have laws against that. The Gambling Commission investigate people who they suspect of doing that, and they should do that. And people who cheat at gambling should face the full consequences of the law.
Just looking at policies briefly, on 2 quick policies. On tax, do you worry, though, that part of the problems with maybe on tax is things you said in 2019 you haven't delivered? Back in 2019, you were elected on a pledge not only to freeze taxes, but to cut them too. Now, you've cut national insurance, but you've frozen those thresholds, so doctors and nurses pay more in tax. So you say one thing, and you do something else. And that's why you maybe got a problem with connecting with people.
No, look, I think everyone recognises we had a pandemic.
Yeah.
Right, and then we had a war in Ukraine drove over everyone's energy bills. It was right that we supported the country through that, the NHS, furlough, help with energy bills. And it's entirely reasonable, and I was straight about it at the time, we would have to start paying that back, because that's the sensible thing to do. Might be difficult for people to hear, but that's the type of leader I am. I want to be straight with people about the things that are right for our country. But we are now cutting people's taxes. And actually, if you look at the taxes that someone in work is paying today, it is lower. With all the changes we've made, they're paying less tax than they would have done in 2019, right? So it is lower. Right, so that is just the reality. When you put all those things together, they're paying hundreds of pounds less tax than they would, right? Because of the cuts that we're now making to national insurance, in particular, worth £900 for everyone in work this year.
Big issue for GBNews viewers is immigration. Back in 2019, you said you'd fix the immigration system. There'll be fewer lower-skilled migrants, and overall numbers will come down. They haven't, have they? And you're having an election based on trust and what you'll do in the future. Yeah. You haven't cut migration.
Well, I've been Prime Minister for 18 months, Chris. And let's
your party, forgive me, your party.
Okay, but I've been Prime Minister. Immigration was too high. Not going to pretend otherwise. Of course it was too high. I've been very clear about that. I've been your Prime Minister, everyone's Prime Minister, for 18 months. In that time, we've taken significant action. Yeah. Net migration was down last year, the first full year I was in office. And this year, thanks to the reforms that I've put in place, the number of visas we've issued is down by 30%. That has never happened. So, for example, we've raised the salary that you have to earn to come here to work to 38.5 grand, tightened up our other visas, 30% down. And do you know what it's forecast to come down by? It's forecast net migration to halve in the next 12 months. Halve, right? Because of the measures that I have taken, we are getting migration down, and we will go further. If I'm re-elected, we will have a legal cap voted on in Parliament every year to guarantee. Well, that's for parliamentarians to set.
10,000, is that even realistic anymore?
But given all the trust that people have on this, the first thing is to deliver what is forecast, which is to halve it. And just like I said, I would halve inflation. We over-delivered on that. First, we're going to halve net migration, and then we're going to reduce it every year thanks to a legal cap on migration. Now, again, the choice for everyone is me or Keir Starmer. I'm the person that's got the number of visas issued down 30% this year. I'm the person where the forecast show net migration is going to halve. I'm the person that will give you a legal cap on migration, voted on in Parliament every year, to guarantee that it keeps falling. Keir Starmer was someone who, when he stood for the Labour leadership, wrote a letter. Right? In that letter, he promised to defend free movement of people. He said we should close the detention centres for illegal migrants, we should close them down. He boasted about getting migrants more welfare, right? And that's why you simply can't trust him on this issue. Okay. Do not surrender our borders to the Labour
Illegal
Party.
numbers, 50,000 on your watch. Illegal arrivals.
Well, actually, if you look at the last 12 months, they're down on the 12 months before that, the full year before.
Depends how you cut it, but 50,000 is a lot.
Okay, but they are down, right? And we have made progress. But the job is not done. In order to get the job done, you need a deterrent. You need to make it crystal clear to people if they come here illegally, they won't be able to stay, they'll be removed. Now, you've seen in the last week, talk to the illegal migrants in Calais themselves. What are they all saying? They're all saying, look, I'm not going to come right now. I'm waiting for this Rwanda screen to be scrapped if the other lot get in, right? As I said, they are queuing up in Calais, waiting for a Labour government. And as I said the other night, if Labour win, the people smugglers and the criminal gangs are going to need a bigger boat. Do not surrender our borders to Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. I asked him multiple times. He can't tell you what he's going to do with illegal migrants. I can. They're on planes and they're out of
Just looking at Reform UK, you have surrendered some of your supporters to Reform UK. Why is Nigel Farage seen as the answer to so many of your problems in the party by some on the right?
Well, what Nigel Farage said about Putin was completely wrong. Plays into Putin's hands. Putin is someone who has deployed nerve agents on the streets of Britain just the other day, doing deals with North Korea. Right? And that kind of appeasement is so damaging to our security and the security of our allies, and it only emboldens Putin further.
But you said that you're a broad church and he could join your party to us last October. Is that the case still?
I said what he said on Putin is completely
You wouldn't allow
wrong.
him in now as a member, would you?
He's standing against the Conservatives at this election. But what I'd say to everyone, right? I'd say to everyone who's Conservative oriented, right? If you want your taxes cut, if you want migration dealt with, if you want a sensible approach to net zero, if you want your pension protected, I'm going to deliver that for you. If you vote for anybody else, you are just going to put... You might not like this, right? And I get that you might think that's unfair, but if you vote for anyone else, you are just going to put Keir Starmer in number 10. You're going to get the precise opposite of what you want, because your taxes are going up. We're going to become the soft touch of Europe when it comes to migration. It's going to reverse all my changes to net zero, and your pension is not going to get protected. It's going to get taxed, and we're going to invest less in our national defence. So if you don't vote Conservative, like, that is what you are going to get.
When you came back from the D-Day commemorations, he says that you weren't patriotic, you don't care about our history, our culture. What did you think about that remark about you personally?
Yeah, look, he should answer what he means by that. But I'm
wasn't it Indian heritage he was talking about, was it?
Well, again, it's up for him to answer what he meant. But I am deeply proud to be British. I'm so proud and thankful for everything that this country has done for me and my family, as we've been talking about. And that's why I do this job. Right? I do this job because of what this country has done for me and my family, and I want to make a difference to people's lives. I love this country, right? And no one should ever question that.
And just finally, your message for GB News viewers. They're watching this interview here. They're worried about immigration, the content, the economy around. I mean, can't Labour do that as well? Are Labour offering a more convincing case now than they have done in recent elections?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that the Labour-run Welsh Parliament have banned GB News, right? So that tells you what they think about GB News and GB News viewers, right? I've come and done GB News People's Forum to talk directly to your viewers, because I respect them and I want to make sure that they know I'm addressing their concerns. And I'll just say this, right? I get that people are frustrated with my party, with me. It's been a difficult few years with COVID, the war in Ukraine. We haven't got everything right. We haven't made as much progress as we would have liked in some areas. But this is not a by-election. Your vote can make a difference. This is a choice about our country's future and the impact it will have on your family finances. Do not give Labour a blank cheque to do what they want. Do not surrender to them. If you do not vote Conservative, your taxes are going up. We will become the soft touch of Europe when it comes to migration. The net zero reforms that I put in place will be reversed. We will invest less in our defence. Your pension will be taxed. Right? That's what's going to happen if you don't vote Conservative. Right? So vote for Conservatives. That's why I can keep cutting your taxes, invest more in our defence, strengthen our borders, protect your pension, and get us to net zero in a sensible way.
Thank you for joining us today on GB News.
Thanks very much for having me.
There we have it. Well, let's get back into the detail with my superstar cross-party panel. Paul Goodman, the Tory peer, the Labour peer, Maurice Glassman, and the former Liberal Democrat, Mark Oaten. Chaps, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, actually, in part 3 of the show, where we'll talk about immigration, what he said about Farage and other issues. But what intrigued me as you were watching that is you're all discussing his tone and the way he's speaking. Mark, you said you thought it was Blairite.
I mean, it was more than tone, it was Tony. If I shut my eyes and I actually listened to some of the phrases, look, right, I'm going to be crystal clear. And then even the way the hands were moving, it actually did feel quite engaging. Also, the look is different, not in a tie, sleeves rolled up. A more casual, but feisty, but casual. And I definitely saw hints of that kind of relaxed, engaging, look, I'm one of the people kind of approach. And that's a little bit different from him.
Maurice, is he more engaging than Keir Starmer, who people think is a bit bland and boring?
No, it's just I think there's a coach somewhere who takes public school boys and turns them into estuary English speakers. So, you know, what I'm saying is it's all completely pathetic. And poor Rishi is just
he can't help
useless...
the way he speaks.
Of course, he has changed the way he speaks. Yeah, his accent is completely different here.
Well, he's brought up in Southampton. He went to Winchester, but
yeah,
I don't think he's changed his accent much, has he?
No, if you pick up on this estuary
it's
thing...
a lot like the way he was at the end of the Tory leadership contest with Liz Truss, where he'd warmed up, he'd done a lot of events, he got faster and more fluent. I think this is what happens in general election campaigns. He's now done so many interviews, he's gone through the pain barrier and has relaxed a bit. I think the tragedy for him is that probably, and you know, senior Tories are saying this themselves, it's come too late. Labour are set to win, and he's now in the business of trying to reduce Labour's majority next week.
What do you think then, Maurice?
No, I think that look, there's much more fundamental problems facing the Conservative Party than Rishi being a bit sleepy in the first 3 weeks of the election.
Didn't say there weren't.
You know, so they were elected to deliver a different economic model. They haven't done it. They were elected on levelling up. They haven't been able to challenge a really failed form of capitalism. This is the fundamental issue. And, you know, I'm just saying that he's just speaking exactly... I wouldn't just say it's Tony Blair, I would say it's George Osborne too. They kind of made this strange accent shift As if they were brought up in
Here's a
Essex.
classic illustration of what the election campaign has been like. Rishi Sunak is trying to talk about what Labour will do or would do. Morris and Labour want to talk about the last 4 or 5 years, and no wonder, given the problems.
Well, the only thing
I think
I'm
there'll be
saying-
some regret, because they've seen how wooden Starmer is. And actually, in this interview, I thought the Prime Minister was more animated, was more interesting, much more interesting than Starmer. So I think there may be some regret. 2 regrets. First of all, if we'd had another few months and we'd had more of this, it might have been different. And the second is, why didn't he start the campaign in this mode? Why is everybody being so cautious? Let loose. And that's why Farage has been popular, because the public say, look, here's a guy who speaks his mind.
Yes.
And that's what these mainstream politicians need to do more of.
Well, on that note, hasn't Robert Blackstock, who is a retired engineer based in Nottinghamshire, become the Brenda of this election campaign in summing up the mood of the nation? And he asked both leaders at the BBC debate last night whether they were the best that Britain could do. He seemed very underwhelmed.
Well,
he seems to be stuck... Hang on,
I
just to finish the point. He seems to be stuck with this sort of Sophie's choice of he's fed up with the Tories, even though he said he was a lifelong Conservative voter. And he wants to punish them for reneging on their manifesto pledges. But he looks at Starmer and he sees absolutely nothing that convinces him he wants to vote for him, because he's worried about his pension and he's worried about fuel duty and he's worried about immigration, inheritance tax and what it might do. He then looks at Farage and just finds reform and some of his rhetoric just too unsavoury. And therefore you've got an electorate out there that isn't banging the drum really for anyone.
And there's going to be very low turnout too.
It isn't, but this is the oddity of the electorate. If you don't say anything much, if you're very cautious, if you incur the criticisms of the IFS for not spelling out what you do, you're treated by the voters with contempt. But if you make a serious attempt to tackle the problem, like great disastrous example, Theresa May's social care policy in 2017, you are finished.
Like your mind, lose your house. What a brilliant election strategy she had.
I think there's something else going on here.
Right?
And
That was how it
it's
was.
a reflection on the fact that the quality of politicians, I think, has gone down. The big beasts that we used to have, you know, you could name all the cabinet. I can't name the cabinet. I can't name who these individuals. I certainly can't name the shadow cabinet. Whereas back in the day, you had the Heseltines, you had the Blairs, the Thatchers.
Okay, hang on.
You had these big beasts that individuals could relate to. They knew them, and there was more respect for politicians.
We're not looking at this. The last general election was Boris Johnson versus Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes.
Right. This was. Both the parties are going through post-traumatic stress disorder about having them as leaders. Now, these were people who spoke. They said what they thought. You know, and we said, oh my God, blah, blah, blah. And now, obviously, the Conservative Party reverted to middle order Thatcherism, middle management. I mean, Rishi Sunak is not a guy who should be even a politician. He's a kind of corporate stats guy about a few, you know, comms, and he does the spreadsheets.
Chaps, we need to leave it there because we need to go to part 3. Our political editor is going to be joining us live in the studio as well to tell us what he really thought of his interview with the Prime Minister. Don't go anywhere because we've got more analysis to come.
Hi there, time for the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Cool Atlantic winds return across the UK this weekend. That means blustery showers, especially for northern parts, but some drier and brighter interludes too, especially across southern parts. Low pressure, an unseasonably deep low, is now crossing northern Scotland. Around the south of that low, we've got these strong winds bringing unpleasant conditions really across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Spells of rain or showers continuing through the night. The strongest winds pushing through northern and northeast Scotland. Meanwhile, further south, it's mostly dry, apart from 1 or 2 showers for Wales and the southwest. Patchy cloud, but a cooler night for many of us, so 11 to 13 Celsius by dawn. Now we start the day with those winds and the outbreaks of rain continuing across northwest Scotland. The Northwest Highlands seeing prolonged and at times heavy rain, and the rain then sweeping into Orkney and Shetland later. Some shelter from the rain across eastern and southern Scotland, but a few showers here, brightening up across Northern Ireland compared with the last 24 hours. A few sunny spells, but also 1 or 2 showers. A few showers there for Wales, Northern England, perhaps the southwest, but the further southeast you are, the drier it will be, the brighter it will be. There'll be quite a lot of cloud, to be honest, across the UK during the day, but some brightness will develop, especially towards the southwest by the afternoon. Further north, any rain tends to break up into showers, but there will be some heavy downpours for the Highlands, Grampians, the northwest of Scotland, and that strong wind continues, making it feel on the cool side. In the south, where we've got some sunshine and lighter winds, 23 Celsius, so not too unpleasant. We start Saturday with a lot of fine weather. Best of the sunshine, the southeast, as well as parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. This finger of cloud pushes into northern and western England as well as Wales to bring some light rain by the afternoon. But for many, this weekend is looking mostly settled, if a lot cooler compared with the weather of recent days.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party. I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
she could have said storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Vote 2024, The Leaders, with me, Camilla Tominey. Before the break, we heard part 2 of GB News' interview with the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Chris Hope, our political editor, is in the studio, joins my superstar panel of Paul Goodman, Maurice Glassman and Mark Oaten. Goodness me, how am I going to keep you chaps in check? Let's start with you, Chopper. Really good interview.
Yeah,
well
thank
done.
you.
I thought he was quite passionate, more passionate than I've seen him. He looked very convinced of his own arguments.
Yeah.
He seemed to handle a little bit of sort of to and fro with you quite well. He was a bit tetchy in the immigration bit, but generally he seemed quite at ease. Has that been the case throughout this campaign?
No, it has not. And in fact, as recently as Monday, I was in Scotland for the launch of the Conservative Scottish Manifesto, and he's very low-key. I mean, he gave a speech, took no questions in the room to all the activists, went to a side room, answered 6 questions from the travelling journalists. 5 of them, including mine, was about betting. Normally a leader would change the subject very quickly. He just answered them repeatedly, and it was really grim. And I thought, gosh, he thinks he's lost already. And then something happened between Monday and Wednesday last night with the BBC debate when he came out punching, and he carried that in this morning. I said to him, have you had your Weetabix, Prime Minister?
Yeah, I've just said that earlier.
Well, no, I've got the answer for you, by the way.
He?
No, he hasn't. He had his muesli and his berries, and he had a fry at breakfast.
What's the thing with the Weetabix?
Well,
maybe he's turned to Viagra.
I'm not sure we can possibly comment on that.
He had a full English breakfast.
Did he?
Yes.
That's very foraging, if you don't mind me saying.
Very un-Sunak, I think.
Right, so let's revisit the immigration chat, because I felt that was the point at which he did bristle a little bit. Let's have a look at what he said about immigration, because you challenged him. He said, well, the Tories haven't done enough to bring the numbers down, and this is what he said.
You haven't cut migration. Well, I've been Prime Minister for 18 months, Chris. And your party, forgive me, your party. OK, but I've been Prime Minister. Immigration was too high. Not going to pretend otherwise. Of course it was too high. I've been very clear about that. I've been your Prime Minister, everyone's Prime Minister, for 18 months. In that time, we've taken significant action. Net migration was down last year, the first full year I was in office. And this year, thanks to the reforms that I've put in place, the number of visas we've issued is down by 30%.
Paul, isn't the main reason the Tories are losing this and losing this so badly is their failure to deal with migration?
I think the main reason is COVID, the Ukraine war, and the Boris Johnson, Liz Truss mess. But immigration certainly is a part of it. And Rishi Sunak can't get people to think about what Keir Starmer's going to do about migration, which doesn't appear to be very much, because you've had this oddity of 3 successive Tory leaders who were migration liberals. Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak himself. Most unlike the bulk of the parliamentary party and most unlike the members. And that's why we are where we are now, with no one much thinking about what Keir Starmer's going to do when he's there next week.
Maurice, Keir Starmer's a migration liberal, isn't he? Didn't he once describe any immigration policy as racist?
You know, politicians go on a journey. He was once a fanatical supporter of Remain, but you know,
and Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, I wouldn't say that he was.
Well, he propped it up for 4 years.
You know, he was a politician in a party who just, you know, kept his head down.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't go.
I'm not sure if he did that. I mean, he celebrated the Corbyn manifesto.
But what was interesting to me today is he said that immigration was a national security issue. Now, I think that opens up interesting space. I mean, could Labour send the Royal Navy into the English Channel? I mean, if it's a national security... They could.
And that is pure Farage, Maurice Glassman. That's what Nigel Farage says. He makes that very point.
Well, you know, if it is a national security issue, then you have to think about military solutions.
I think there's another issue at play on immigration. Whatever your views on it, and I think we all have differing views around the table here, it's about competence and whether you can actually deliver things you say you're going to do, and whether or not people think you've got a competent solution. And I don't think the public actually recognised Rwanda as a serious option. So they may have strong views on migration, but the problem the Conservatives have got is this ridiculous idea of putting people on airplanes. Nobody's gone there except for Home Secretary after Home Secretary. And the public can see through that.
Really quick word on that, Chris, because actually even people that are really concerned about immigration don't like the Rwanda scheme. They don't think it's going to work.
No, because it's been sort of sabotaged by lawyers and the rest. But I was trying to read out...
People like Keir Starmer.
Trying to read out... The point was they fought the 2019 election on bringing down migration, and it's gone up threefold. That's the problem.
All right, you've got something to say.
Yeah, I've got something to say, is that the entire Conservative political economy is cheap labour, Deliveroo economy, bring in cheap labour, because they don't do anything about vocation. So that's what I mean, Paul, when I say that there's a fundamental problem that the Conservatives can't align markets with their
really quickly, Paul, because I want to talk about Nigel Farage.
You're not getting an answer from Labour either. And on the matter of Rwanda, flawed though the Rwanda scheme may be, no one has come up with a workable alternative.
No.
The Labour solutions, insofar as their original, aren't good. The good bits of it, the government's doing already.
All right, let's just be reminded of what Rishi Sunak said about... Let's just be reminded of what Rishi Sunak said about Nigel Farage and the prospect of working with him to reunite the right.
But you said that you're a broad church and you could join your party to us last October. Is that the case still?
No, I said what he said on Putin is completely
You wouldn't allow him in now as a member, would you?
He's standing against the Conservatives at this election.
I mean, it's interesting he instantly mentioned Putin because he knows that that's a vulnerability, right? I mean, somebody pointed that out while we were watching. Was that you, Paul?
Yes, it was. He went straight in. He was asked about Farage, and sort of light went up in Sunak's house. Putin. That's the line.
Well, he told us last October we're a broad church. When I said to him, "Can Farage join your party?" and he didn't say no. Then he merely said he's standing against my party.
It's a really interesting change of gear. Now you've actually got an election on, and Farage has come in and is standing candidates against the Conservatives. The Putin thing, it is a weakness for Farage. People will think just a bit. Your ordinary sort of right-wing, disillusioned, Tory-type voter think, it doesn't sort of smell quite right to me. It's not even so much Farage's line on Ukraine. It's his instinctive reaction to Putin. He's a strong leader.
And
right back there. And then you know
Paul,
that is a character
Farage
test.
would have been an appeaser in the 30s. You just know it.
Maurice,
You
there's
don't know
no way
Just
for that
know.
at all.
No,
it's not bringing the Second World War up.
You've always got to bring the Second World War up.
Been
Only
out
ended
for every
yesterday. What do you
D-Day
say,
commemoration
Chris?
there's been.
He may be dismissing Farage now, but in 10 days' time, it's going to be absolutely fascinating if we get crossover, this point at which Reform outpoll the Conservatives.
I mean, they already have in a couple of polls.
But in the big poll, now, bizarrely, they're going to get no seats Reform because of the electoral system, and the Conservatives will get the seats. Probably no seats.
How many seats are the Lib Dems going to get?
They're going to get around 70 seats.
What, 70 for the Lib Dems, but none
watch
for the
this
Reform
fate.
Party?
Because of the electoral system, it's unfair. I agree with Nigel Farage.
What, we're going to wake up on July the 5th and we've got the potential for Ed Davey to be the opposition leader?
You've got the potential for
straight
Reform.
From Thorpe Park.
You've got potential for Reform to poll maybe 17, 18% and get no seats.
So you
and that
will
is
then
undemocratic.
be hooking up with Nigel Farage to campaign for proportional representation,
I already said it's the one issue I agree with him on.
But Ed Davey and Daisy Cooper have ruled out working with him. So are you people who can enter into coalition, pardon the pun, Mark, or not?
Well, clearly we have in the past, and look how that worked out.
Yes, indeed.
Labour is now backing first past the post in spades, just to let you know.
We do.
You love it, Maurice.
fallen back in love with first
I love the
class.
ancient constitution. I love this.
Yeah, indeed.
It keeps a link with place.
All right,
You
look,
just
final
state it
thought. We've
from
got
the
less
front.
than a minute. We've got to be really quick. Predictions, please, for next Thursday. Paul, quickly.
It's not going to be good for the Conservatives, I'm afraid. So the question is, how big will the Labour majority be?
If the Conservatives end up with a seat number that's in 3 figures rather than 2, that'll be a good result, won't it?
I don't know, because the MRPs are varying so wildly.
Yeah.
It's very hard to say.
Chopper.
I think that the appeal for the 150,000 might turn around for dozens of seats for the Tory party.
All right, silent Conservatives
Yes.
are going to come out on July the 4th. Morris.
Horrific decimation of the Conservative Party.
Oh, maybe-
Unprecedented
Maybe
in
for a
post-war
smaller
history.
vote share than Corbyn won in 2017
And it
for
will
Labour.
be that
Mark,
way.
very quickly.
I'm canvassing a lot. The unknown is the reform vote. It's really hard to call what will happen with that.
The great unknown. Well, it's 45 to end the program. I've got a bit more time than I thought we had.
Great.
All right, final thought from you then, Chopper, the man of the moment with this interview. Can he pull this back around? Could a miracle happen?
Come on, tell the truth.
It's too late. I don't know where this Rishi Sunak was in week 1. It's week 6, and he's pulled it out of the bag. I don't know where he was. I think the attack line now is good.
All right.
What would you do? What would you do,
I've
Keir
got to
Starmer?
stop it. I've got to stop it. More Weetabix for the Prime Minister is our conclusion on this panel tonight. Coming up next, we've got Michael Portillo, who's going to be hosting State of the Nation from 8 p.m, so stay tuned for that, because he's always got something insightful to say. I'm going to be back on Sunday for my show, where I've got an exclusive interview with Kemi Badenoch. You'll want to watch it, 9:30. See you then. Have a great evening.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, time for the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Cool Atlantic winds return across the UK this weekend. That means blustery showers, especially for northern parts, but some drier and brighter interludes too, especially across southern parts. Low pressure, an unseasonably deep low, is now crossing northern Scotland. Around the south of that low, we've got these strong winds bringing unpleasant conditions really across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Spells of rain or showers continuing through the night. The strongest winds pushing through northern and northeast Scotland. Meanwhile, further south, it's mostly dry, apart from 1 or 2 showers for Wales and the southwest. Patchy cloud, but a cooler night for many of us, so 11 to 13 Celsius by dawn. Now we start the day with those winds and the outbreaks of rain continuing across northwest Scotland. The Northwest Highlands seeing prolonged and at times heavy rain, and the rain then sweeping into Orkney and Shetland later. Some shelter from the rain across eastern and southern Scotland, but a few showers here, brightening up across Northern Ireland compared with the last 24 hours. A few sunny spells, but also 1 or 2 showers. A few showers there for Wales, Northern England, perhaps the southwest, but the further southeast you are, the drier it will be, the brighter it will be. There'll be quite a lot of cloud, to be honest, across the UK during the day, but some brightness will develop